So I recently saw The Creator. I'd seen the trailer several times in the past. It looked kind of interesting. It's from the director of Rogue One, but I didn't think Rogue One was directed particularly well. I thought it was solid, but it wasn't something I thought was such a magnificent piece of work that I need to see everything that the creators behind it made. But it certainly didn't make me want to not see it. However, I do like John David Washington. I'm a huge fan of his father, of course. And one thing I'll say right now is he sounds exactly like his father in this movie. It's almost like Denzel Washington came in and dubbed over his son's voice for the movie. I hope that's not what actually happened, and I don't think it is, but that's how much it sounds like, especially when he's not on screen, you hear his voice. It sounds like you're hearing Denzel Washington talking and not his son. And, when I saw Tenet, which he's in, I didn't get that feeling. It didn't seem like I was listening to, maybe because he's always in the screen when he's talking, but I didn't get that feeling like I'm hearing Denzel Washington. But this one, there's a lot of off-camera talking. And so when that happened, it felt almost like I was listening to Denzel Washington instead of his son. Anyway, he's in it. It's got robots. It's sci-fi. You kind of basically sold me. So, and I actually did, in researching for this review, I did do some research of the pedigree of the writer and director. And what I found was pretty interesting. So apparently, neither of them is particularly experienced, but they both, not just the director, but the director and the other co-writer along with the director, both worked on Rogue One. So it's not just the director of Rogue One, like it says above here. It's the writer and the director of Rogue One. So it does both of them. So what's the creator about? What's the trailer tell us? So in the trailer, we see that's the near future. AI is becoming ingrained in our world. We're using it for all types of different things. It seems like a little bit of a slavery thing where they're doing all the stuff we don't want to do. But again, this is all set up rather quickly. And within the first 2 or 3 minutes of the movie, we find out about the accident that nukes Los Angeles. Now, we're told, the movie tells us that the AI nuked Los Angeles on purpose for some reason. Later on, we find out it's more complicated than that, but that's initially what we're told. So the AI destroyed Los Angeles, and for that reason, the United States goes to, I think we are just the United States, because they have something called like New Asia. They don't have a specific other foreign country that the AI are in now. They just call it like New Asia or something like that. But we're still the United States of America. So the United States of America declares war on AI. Any, I guess, carriers of AI, it's a little vague there. Any carriers of AI or that run on the advanced, I guess, sentient AI that exists. They don't go in a lot of detail about how powerful or whatever. They just kind of say it's artificial intelligence. So the implication is that it's the same as our intelligence, just in machines, because there's no real delineation made. It's just their AI. And so when you do that, and you're not drawing any fine lines, you're essentially saying they've been able to duplicate human consciousness in robots. And so that's what's happening. And so our main character, John David Washington, is this guy that's living in New Asia. He's got a history with the American government, but we discover him at the beginning of the movie in New Asia. And in New Asia, AI is ingrained with the population. It's part of, they have them as cops and as, I think, sex workers, or at least like doing like strip clubs and stuff. But they're ingrained in life. And there's also something called begins with an S, but they're essentially AI that don't look like robots. They have kind of skin grafted faces. You can tell they're AI though, because the back of their neck and their ear is a hole. There's a hole through their head. So they're not like replicants and Blade Runner. You can't tell that they're human beings, or you think they're human beings. They're robots. We know they're robots, but they're just a little bit more pleasing to the eye than a robot. The other robots look like they have like a flat head, like just like almost like a fin from like a almost sharks, like a hammerhead shark. They kind of very flat heads and look very non-human. Whereas the, I don't want to just call them replicants, but I can't think of the name of what they're called. Is it on this piece of paper? I don't know if I see it. Yes, New Asia, United States of America. I can't think of it. But essentially, they're robots that look more like people, but still are clearly robots. And so the inciting event to the movie is that John David Washington's life gets turned upside down. There's a military raid on his little quiet home in New Asia, and it disrupts his life. And pretty soon after that, again, I'm trying not to do too many spoilers. So pretty soon after that, you can tell this from the trailer, he finds himself caring for this girl that's a robot. She's an AI, but she's her persona is of a little girl that apparently the American government wants, and he, for his reasons, wants to keep from them. And so it kind of becomes a chase movie. And so that's kind of the majority of the fun and games of the second act is as a chase movie. And of course, as things go on, they reach a head in whatever way that the movie does. Again, don't want to do spoilers, but that's the gist of the movie. And that's what the trailer tells us. So, uh, one thing I like to do when I go through and review movies is go through the act structure. Before I do that, let me talk a little bit about the acting performances of the movie. John David Washington is not as good an actor as his father. That's a high bar to set. I like watching him, but I have no illusions that his acting ability is relatively limited. And in this movie, he's not given a ton of dialogue to chew on. A lot of his looks and feelings, but it's definitely wanting for something in terms of coloring. You wish there's a little bit more in terms of the dialogue, both kind of the stuff that reveals up about him and both his relationship with the little girl. The little girl is played by an actress named Madeline Una Royals. It's her debut. She's very good for a child actor. She's probably a 9 or 10 out of 10. She's an excellent child actor. She doesn't do a lot of talking, but when she does a good job with her lines. She's great facial expressions. She really sells the humanity of the AI. I'm tempted to kind of call him an android, but I'm gonna call him AI. That's what the movie calls him. She really sells you the kind of quote unquote humanity of her AI. And her performance is probably the best in the movie in terms of there's nothing I would change about it. Another good performance is Ken Watanabe. He plays one of the kind of AI fighters that resist the American forces in New Asia. Because one of the things that's going on during the movie is America is chasing him through New Asia. So New Asia is his own sovereign, and you've got the American forces and this big monolith they kind of call the Nomad floating overhead, and they're going after them in this other sovereign country and just doing whatever they want. And it's a weird thing they don't talk about a whole lot, but this movie definitely doesn't paint the United States foreign policy in a particularly good light. It kind of says it portrays the United States of we're going to do what we want to do, regardless of other people's borders, which unfortunately there's historical precedent for. But in this movie, it's not even a discussion. It's just we're going in, we're doing what we're doing, and we're going after these AI. We're going to bomb wherever we want to bomb in New Asia, and we're not going to worry about it. So that's kind of going on all at the same time. So that's a lot what's kind of going on there. So Ken Watanabe is good. There's another actress, Allison Janney. She's one of those actresses you've seen in a lot of movies. You've seen her in a lot of stuff. You know, like who is that lady? Like I didn't know her name, but I've seen her in like half a dozen movies. She's one of the antagonists. She's very good. And there are other supporting performers. The acting is generally above average in the movie and definitely helps sell a lot of the drama because this movie's ultimately to kind of talk about genre for a minute. It's science fiction, but that's the setting. The movie is an action drama. It's got action in it, but it's very grounded in the actual drama of what's happening. Kind of like maybe Platoon. Platoon has its share of action moments in it, but it's very grounded in the drama of those soldiers in Vietnam. In the same way, the action sequences are certainly present, but they're not overwhelming. They're not bombarding you with special effects. The special effects that are done are very good, and it's clear that they were trying to they use darkness and whatever to save some money because what special effects you do see are very good. And I was fairly impressed by the special effects in the movie. But as an action drama, balances those two, I think, fairly well. It's long; it's 2.5 hours. I'll tell you that now as well. Again, my thoughts aren't super organized. I like to just kind of I have my notes generally laid out, but then I kind of just go and see what comes to mind. Anyway, so the next thing let me talk about the act structure. So generally, if you don't know, movies, you can generally think of movies as 3 acts. The first act sets up the situation, the environment, and ends in the main character sets up their kind of normal nominal life. And then an inciting incident brings you towards the end. It ends the first act. The second act is the lion's share of the movie. That's kind of the character as they struggle against antagonism towards whatever goals they have. And those goals could shift, but that's all the complications of fun and games. All that stuff happens for lighter hearted movies. You call them fun and games. For something like this, it's more the drama and the complications happen in the second act. And the third act is the resolution. And it's primarily the giant, in movies like this, a big set piece or maybe more than one set piece. So that's kind of the general structure of movies. And so this movie actually has a very good first act. It's very quick. It's got a lot to go over to really get you engaged and involved. And I think it does a pretty good job of efficiently getting you from setting up the general environment, the future, the characters set up. They've got a little bit of a minor, small story to tell as part of the first act before even really getting to the mainstay of the story. And that's tough. So I won't say the first act's great. It's a little long because they have a lot they have to do in the first act to set the movie going. The second act is pretty good. It's complex. There's a lot going on, but once it gets going, it's very agile and moves along pretty well. So I didn't have a lot of complaints about how the second act went. There's some good moments. Again, I've already talked about some of the acting and some of the scenes I thought maybe were a little bit undercooked in terms of, especially between John David Washington and the little girl. That I thought they could have done a little bit more with. They tried to do a lot with looks and limited just conversation. I think they could have done a little bit more with that. And then the third act, I thought was a very emotional, fulfilling third act. Um, brought some tears to my eyes. I thought that I connected with the movie, and on that at least the basic level of emotional connection, it worked. And some movies for me don't do that. I watch them and I'm just disconnected the whole time. This movie for me drew me in successfully, and the conclusion was emotionally effective and fulfilling. It's this is not a movie that's trying to particularly trick you. It's really just about selling you on the drama of the characters and making you care about what's happening to them. And I think it does a pretty good job. The I don't have a lot else for this movie in terms of discussion. I kind of went through it as I was going here. I'll just say 2.5 hours. It's a hard sell to ever rewatch. Usually when I recommend a movie, I give something 7 or above. I put it in the highest tier of movies I would recommend to people. I usually like to feel like I rewatched them at least once, if not more than once. This one, I'm not sure if I could because it's so long and it is a lot of dramatic looking. And I think if I, had a significant other and they particularly hadn't seen it and wanted to see it, I probably would sit with it with them because I know it's a good movie. But on my own, I'm kind of doubtful. And so for that reason, I still give it a 7 out of 10. It's still in that top tier of movies I recommend, but it's only a 7, and that's on the lower end of sevens because it is, I think, although I don't think it could have been any shorter, it's just a difficult story they were trying to tell. And I think on a scene level, the scenes are a bit hit and miss. The overall story is excellent, the acting's excellent, but I do think that because of the again, moment to moment scenes kind of being hit or miss sometimes. And, oh yeah, here's the one other thing. I almost forgot about this. There's some plot holes. If you're one of those people that gets really stuck on movies not entirely making sense or starting to explain things, but then stopping the explanations at some point, this movie may bug you a little bit. There's some turns that happen that aren't particularly well explained. They just happen and you just have to accept them. And I think there'll probably be some videos that come out on YouTube of people making fun of these relatively large plot holes for a movie that is this serious, that takes itself this serious. You have to be careful about how many plot holes you have. When it's a sillier movie, like I'm gonna review The Flash later in this stream. When you're dealing with that, who cares if there are plot holes in it? That movie's tone is such that that's the least of your problems. But this movie really takes itself as a serious drama with action in it. And when you do that, things that don't make sense or that go unexplained are a little bit more problematic. And again, I don't want to this isn't a debunking video. I don't want to spoil things, but because of that, that hurt the movie a little bit as well. Is that it snaps you out of the suspension of disbelief. And this is a sci-fi movie that's critical of suspension of disbelief. And this movie was a little bit hurt me a little bit there. The fact that I had some of the issues with the plotting and some of the things that happened not being really explained very well and seeing kind of questionable, like, why is that happening? Or I don't understand how that person could do that. So you get some of that going on. So, but that's my review of uh, The Creator. I think if you saw the trailer and you think it looked good to you, then I'd recommend it. But understand that it is a movie with some flaws in it. I just think that it's good enough that it's still worth recommending despite those flaws. So if you got this far in the video, thank you for watching, and please consider liking and subscribing. And stay tuned for more videos from Low Key Classic Movies and more live streams every Monday.